Good morning, gamers. Today I want to talk to you about some updates in the Bolin versus Bonta case, as well as the potential for the moving forward of a police off-roster handgun ban that could have pretty big impacts on the availability of off-roster handguns in the state of California. Now, me personally, I am not going to shed many tears by seeing police being treated the same as us lowly civilians, but it's something that's worth talking about, and we have some updates in the Bolin versus Bonta handgun roster case that I am a part of that is pretty interesting that you might want to know more about. We're going to be talking about how some guns can fall off the handgun roster, but it's looking like that might not really be the case. It's been kind of reported. A lot of people are fear-mongering about the potential for handguns like Glocks in the state of California disappearing, but not really looking like that's the case, and I'll explain why today. So, before we get going, I want to say thank you to everyone that supports this channel. Been a while since I uploaded a video. Haven't been uploading a whole lot. Kind of burnt out on the whole outrage fatigue thing, so I kind of wanted to just wait until there's enough for me to talk about before I make a video. If you're interested in just kind of staying up to date on the daily event changes, there's a lot of great channels that talk about that. Arm Scholar, Guns and Gadgets. Go check them out. If you just want to hear some stuff that I personally think is important, because this channel is just me curating my own stuff, like, subscribe, notifications, that kind of thing. If you want to meet me in person, Route 66 Shooting Sports Park, which is one of the sponsors of this channel, we're planning an event in October. I believe it's the 7th and 8th. We're going to have more information to come on that as that gets worked out, but we are going to be doing that down in San Bernardino. If you haven't checked them out, I highly recommend you do so. So, the law enforcement handgun ban, SB 377. This is a bill introduced by Nancy Skinner, one of my favorites in the state of California. I love her so much. Now, Nancy Skinner thought that it was outrageous that law enforcement can purchase handguns that are not on the not unsafe for sale handgun roster. And I'm sorry for the Italian sign language, you're going to have to deal with it. It just is the way it is. She then decided to write SB 377, which would close the law enforcement loophole, as they are wording it. Now, do I lose sleep over law enforcement being treated the same as us lowly civilians? No, not at all. But if law enforcement are unable to purchase these firearms, that's a huge part of the supply for the people that demand them in the state of California. Now, this bill looks like it has made it through the Senate and is going to be moving over to the state House of Representatives and whatnot, and they're going to be voting it back and forth, but it's gaining traction and gaining steam and is moving through the process. So it's looking like SB 377 could potentially pass, very likely, because they're wording it as closing a major loophole, because the unsafe handgun roster works and keeps you safe. That's what they're saying anyway. Now, SB 377 has been, in some ways, good for us in the state of California, because since involvement of those bills has been pushed forward by these Democratic politicians, PORAC and some other agencies or some lobbying groups that represent law enforcement in the state of California have come out and wrote amicus briefs in support of the Bolin versus Bonta handgun roster case, which is huge to have their support. Having the support of the police makes it very hard for them to say, them being the politicians, makes it very hard for them to say that this is what the police want and it's in the interest of public safety. Because we all know the handgun roster is ridiculous. It's all meant to just reduce the supply of handguns in the state of California, making it harder for you to purchase what you would want to have adequate means of protection and any other lawful purpose that the Second Amendment is intended to protect. Because the Second Amendment doesn't grant you your rights, it just acknowledges it. Topic for another day. So, talking about Bolin versus Bonta, there's a couple big things. This one, a lot of people didn't talk about, a lot of people kind of missed, kind of flew under the radar, but the Bruin team, the legal team that delivered the Bruin win that changed CCW stuff across the nation about a year ago, just a little bit over a year ago, that team was actually brought on to represent us, which is huge. Michelle and Associates and the CRPA do great work, and it's awesome to see them bring in these people who have won one of the biggest cases in the nation. So I'm very happy to have their support. CRPA does great work. If you want to donate to them, I highly recommend you do so. Now, I'm going to take a look at the handgun roster. If you're unfamiliar with the handgun roster, there is a website that you could drop down by manufacturer or caliber and sort it by a variety of means to look at what handguns you can actually purchase in the state of California. Makes it pretty helpful for when you're looking at a gun online, you're like, oh man, is that the Gen 3 Glock that's available in California? Let me check real quick. You could look on there. On their website, they have two things down at the bottom of the front page. One of them is the recently added handgun models and the recently removed handgun models. So, the recently added handgun models. Now, I believe this hasn't quite been updated as recently because currently they are showing the Ruger LCP2 in 22 long rifle, as well as two Smith & Wesson or two Colt Anaconda revolvers in 44 Magnum and a Smith & Wesson revolver in 350 Legend. Now, revolvers are nothing new. Revolvers have been able to get added to the roster because the requirements on them are different. They don't need micro stamping. So we've had a variety of revolvers added, including the Colt Python, the new production Colt Pythons. In addition to that Ruger LCP2 and 22 long rifle, Ruger also has the LC380, which has been on the roster forever, the Mark IV Ruger. So the 22 long rifle pistol that kind of has the shape of the Lugers. I'm not going to call it a clone or anything like that, but you know what I'm talking about, right? Looks similar to the Browning Buckmark. The Ruger Mark IV is awesome to have on the roster because the takedown and disassembly of it is way easier. I own an off-roster Ruger Mark II pistol. Every time I want to clean that gun, I have to watch a YouTube video explaining to me how to do it because you kind of have to do the Macarena, flip it around, but it's cool to have that on the roster as a target pistol. In addition to that, Ruger also added the 22 long rifle SR22. Now, I believe that one might have been on the roster at one point and then got re-added back to it, but 3 new Ruger pistols have been added to the handgun roster, which is great, and they're semi-automatic, which is a big difference from some of the companies that have been popping up recently doing single-shot exemptions, getting them on the roster, or just single-shot roster-exempt pistols, which are pretty interesting that I've done some reviews on, and we'll hopefully be doing a review on in the future of a staccato style 2011 pistol, but more on that in a later date. Now, every time we talk about handguns getting added to the roster, the same question gets asked, and maybe I don't do a good enough job explaining it, but recently in the last couple of years, a law was changed so that if a handgun with micro stamping and all the other features gets added to the handgun roster, a semi-auto, the oldest one on the books that's been on the roster the longest time, would fall off. That's the rule. Semi-auto handgun gets added on the roster with micro stamping and all the other features. The longest standing pistol on the roster gets removed, or 3 of them from the oldest to newest gets removed for every one that gets added. That's concerning. A lot of people asked about the CA320, not semi-auto, not worried about it. Revolvers, not a semi-auto, not worried about it. Now we have some semi-auto pistols getting added to the roster. Is that cause for concern? Well, it's unclear specifically from what I've seen on the internet and from what I've talked to people about that know this kind of stuff, why. But if we look at the recently removed pistols on the handgun roster on that, the most recent one was in February of this year, and it was the CA320. Now, CA320 still on the roster. When handguns get added or removed from the roster, sometimes it can be as simple as they just changed the way that they manufactured it, so now it has to be re-added and the old models removed. Not to be concerned, you can still get the CA320, but you'll notice that no new or no older handguns have been removed since the addition of these 3 Ruger pistols, which is good news. There's a couple reasons that this could be happening. Maybe the DOJ does not want to enforce that part of the law because it would be bad for their court cases, like Bolin and I believe Reno. Bolin, my court case that I'm involved with the CRPA and Michelle and Associates, and now the Bruin team, we got things changed. Microstamping, no longer a requirement. And it's believed that because the way that the law is written when it comes to removing the old guns, microstamping is still one of the requirements on there. So if it has a magazine disconnect, loaded chamber indicator, microstamping, those things, all those other features gets tested, semi-auto pistol added to the roster, then 3 of the oldest would get removed. But now that microstamping isn't required, it's not really fitting that definition anymore for that penal code. it is very possible that that is why these handguns are not being removed, even though 3 new semi-autos have been added. Interestingly enough, with 22 long rifle or rimfire semi-auto handguns, if they get added to the roster, they only need a magazine disconnect. They don't need a loaded chamber indicator. So that's why we see these semi-autos very quickly added all in rimfire. Could future models be added in centerfire configurations? Yes, very likely. However, loaded chamber indicators are not something that's standard on most guns, so it would require some different machining. Maybe we get some of the old SIGs back. Maybe we get some of the Smith & Wesson M&P series back. We will see how that plays out. But as of right now, only 22s are getting out of the roster. No firearms are being removed from the roster, which is very good news. So the roster case right now, briefs are being filed. Not a whole lot of groundbreaking or earth-shattering news to talk about, but there is stuff. People have been asking me constantly, what's an update? Here's your update. Handguns are getting added to the roster. Handguns are not being removed from the roster because of that. Some bills are being passed that would close the law enforcement loophole. And law enforcement advocacy groups are siding with us and writing letters of support. Now, another topic I wanted to kind of just quickly touch on was actually super interesting because the BioFire Technologies, the smart gun manufacturer that kind of spread all over the news recently with their biometric and face scanning technology built into it, they actually wrote an amicus brief in support of our lawsuit, Bolin versus Bonta, saying that this technology should be available but should not be mandated, which is very interesting. They want to produce a product for a consumer base that would be interested. They do not want their technology to be required, and they have gone on record to say that they will not be in support of requiring any sort of smart gun technology to be mandated, which is really cool to see. I don't have a problem with people developing technology for people that want to utilize that technology. Would I personally ever rely on a smart gun? No. No, I would not. The amount of times that my iPhone has not recognized my face or thumbprint back when they had thumbprint scanners leaves me very concerned that I would not want that technology to be needed in a life or death scenario. Might someone be interested in it? Sure. I'm sure there is a demand for this product. It just isn't me. But it's great that this company, who could very easily be used as the figurehead for gun control, is not supporting it, which is great to see. It's great to see law enforcement stepping up and pushing back against the roster as a whole, and not just asking for help with their police exemptions. If you have any questions, any comments, leave your thoughts down below. Let me know what you think. You guys know the drill. Have fun, be safe, stay dangerous. Peace. Today I'm using a Magpul bipod as my microphone holder, in case you were wondering. Thanks.